Hello and welcome back to another episode of Church is Stupid.
Comma butt.
I'm Ruth.
I'm Elijah.
I'm still Sam.
And still Sam he is. We're back to talk more about women in leadership, and we talked a little bit about the history, and now we're going to talk a little more about our personal experience. As you can imagine, that is pretty personal to me, being
Why?
a female leader in the church.
You?
What?
No way.
I'm not seeing the connection.
No?
No.
There's none. But yeah, there's a lot of stuff I could get into. But first I want to hear about your guys' experience in the church and seeing women in leadership.
Well, I don't know. Growing up in my sort of youth group, very, very youth focused, non-denominational church. I don't know. It's difficult to say that I really viewed anyone as a particular leader in our youth group. It felt sort of like a collaborative effort. Mm-hmm. And it seemed like it was pretty gender mixed, I think, from what I remember. It's a little bit hard to look back on that now with fresh eyes, if I'm being honest, though, because it was so impactful at the time that it took such a... I don't know. I had such a view of it in my brain back then, and it was so impactful that it's hard for me to look back on it with new eyes, sort of.
Yeah.
But we were just a bunch of kids who were trying to figure out what the heck we were doing, and we were also leading a bunch. At least that's how it felt to me. But I felt like at least then it seemed like in our youth group, at the very least, in our whole youth program, that we were pretty that there were almost just as much women in that leadership as men. Maybe not as much, but I don't know. It was something that I felt like should have been normal. Granted, at that point, I didn't really understand all of. I couldn't have ever understood all the things, all the issues that usually come with women trying to get into leadership in the church now. Anyway, so I can't say that I was able to really make any perceptions about it, but I think I was fortunate enough to be part of a younger group who seemed pretty welcoming for women and men in leadership.
Well, and what's interesting, who was the pastor of that church?
The pastor was a man.
And were there any other females serving in leadership outside of the youth program?
With the actual church, Sunday service, it did not feel the same.
Which is fair.
Yeah, but with our youth program, it felt... when I think about my childhood church, I really mostly associate it with the youth program because it was so uniquely youth-focused that honestly, there were points where I wouldn't even go to Sunday service. I would only go to that youth program. It was usually on Thursdays.
Well, because that's where you heard God.
Yeah, that was my church, even though that was a youth program of an actual church group that I didn't really go to or feel... it was a part of something bigger, and that thing that was bigger, had a male pastor. And as far as I know, in terms of major leadership like that, I don't think that there were any other women involved. But I can't honestly say that with anything definitive.
Mm-hmm.
I remember going to Sunday school, and I remember, our Sunday school teachers were always women, but I feel like that's not really that rare. It's probably typical. So.
Well, and you married a female pastor, so...
Yeah, I did.
I'm going to ask you the question. What's it like being married to a female pastor?
No, never know how to answer that question. Because to me, it's I don't know, I'm married to a pastor. I don't know. It's
fair.
I see a lot of the stuff that she has to put up with, for sure. But I don't know. I'm extremely fortunate to be able to stay home with our daughter. And... it is interesting just to see some of the things that go on in the church, and some of the, obviously not all of the experience, but it is different seeing now the stigma that some people have towards female pastors or females in leadership at all in the church setting. Now that I have this sort of perspective of of my wife having to deal with it much more often than I ever would have thought someone would need to.
Well, and I think it's interesting because some of the points that I've found most interesting navigating this together, because pastoral ministry is never done in silo, but is that there are a number of times where people have said things to me or done things that were vastly inappropriate or unreasonable, and you wanted to help with the situation, and I had to continually tell you no, because while I can't speak on whether or not it would be different if I was the man and you were the woman, but for a woman in leadership to have a man come in and basically tell them, you need to correct your behavior, is to undermine every ounce of authority that they have, because it will be seen as, okay, she doesn't have this authority, someone else has to. And so I would always hold you back. I don't think I ever was like, oh no, that's fine. But, and that it was something that I had to be aware of, that if I wanted to maintain a place of authority in any way, I had to make sure that you were not seen as coming to my defense or really fighting my battles for me.
Right. And
in ways that might have been nothing in the reverse situation, but for a female in leadership would have been like, she can't even handle that on her own.
Right, yeah.
But Sam, what about you? What's your experience with, I mean, I know you, so just pretend you're talking to Elijah or something.
What's the question again?
Oh, sorry. Elijah, will you explain the question to him?
Yeah.
I clearly didn't do it. I clearly didn't do it efficiently.
Can you mansplain the question to me so I get it? One man for another.
What was the question again? No. Do you have any? What's your experience, or do you have any notable experiences with women in leadership throughout your life?
Is it just like with just leadership in general?
Yeah, do you
In
want it to
any
be
way.
church?
Because honestly,
Well, it could be both, yeah.
Yeah. Because I have more experience with it outside of the church. Because I'd say growing up, I always kind of saw mom as the head of the house. I'm sorry if you're listening, Dad.
Ooh, they do listen.
I know.
This just got juicy.
No offense,
All right,
Dad.
continue, Samuel.
So I don't know. I've never even thought about like it being like a bad thing or a negative stigma on women, because I was always like, oh yeah, my mom runs the house kind of, and obviously she's a teacher as well, so like I get that too. Like most of my teachers growing up have all been female too, so I've always just kind of looked more towards females for leadership sometimes.
You're kidding. Did it ever feel, even if it didn't, like you didn't have thoughts of it like growing up as like being bad or negative or something, did it ever feel like it was different even?
Oh, all the time, because I even like in college, a professor was like, they were like yelling at me because I was like, because they were like, they asked me a question like, they're like, oh, so the man obviously leads your house. I'm like, I don't think so. I think my mom does. And like, oh yeah, but what does your mom do on Thanksgiving? I'm like, it makes the food, but like that's not like a negative thing.
Right.
Like people always like, they're always like shocked and like taken aback when I say like, I think my mom leads the house. Like,
sure.
Well, and I would agree that I think our situation was unusual.
Yeah.
I was gonna say, do one of you want to just kind of recap maybe anyone who's listening on like the dynamics in your household growing up?
So my mom is a very strong woman.
Yes.
And she has been forever. And her mom was a very strong woman. And I know it's really surprising to imagine me coming from a long line of strong women. But I do. And so just to kind of add to some of what Sam said, the sides that I know about a little more than I think you do are some of the burdens that mom felt on top of that. So why does mom cook at Thanksgiving? Because she feels like it's her duty to do that.
Yeah.
Why does mom cook most of the meals at our house? Because she feels like that's her duty.
Yeah.
Why would mom get so upset about the house not being clean when parishioners would come over? Because they don't look to dad and say, oh, your house is a mess.
Yeah.
They look to mom and say, why aren't you keeping the house? Even though that wasn't how we were raised to see things.
Yeah.
That would be the perception. And I think that was something that made it so difficult for me going into pastoral ministry as a woman, because I had no idea how bad it was.
Yeah.
because it was just normal. I mean, our mom made more money than our dad. Sorry again, Dad, if you're listening, I love you. My dad is wonderful. Our dad is really, really great.
Yeah.
But you know, I think it's fair to say a lot of times that if we really knew that, if we wanted to think we were in trouble, it was, oh, your mom's gonna come talk to you. And we were like, oh crap, no, please no. And I think that maybe in a lot of ways that's not normal. Not that Dad wasn't scary when he was upset, but like I feel like the threat was always Mom.
Yep.
I don't know, but it was normal for us. There was nothing. I mean, I guess maybe our parents were also just very open with that kind of thing.
Yeah.
And so it didn't, you know, I kind of always knew that Mom made more than Dad did, and there was nothing strange about it. We also watched Mom support Dad through school. Yeah. Which meant that Mom was the one who was in the house, was it 1 or 2 days a week?
Yeah, I think so.
When Dad was gone. But she worked outside the home the entire time that we were alive. And she worked an hour away from where we lived at the point in which my dad was going to school, and still took care of 4 children, bless her soul. But then also, my dad supported my mom through getting her doctorate when she got her doctorate later on. And so I always felt like we saw kind of that balance. And once I got older, I started to hear more of the burdens that she felt that I didn't know that she felt. Yeah. But because of who she was, she never placed those on me. So I don't feel the same burdens. If our house is a mess, I don't feel like it's my fault, and I don't really care. I mean, I do care, and it is my fault to quite a large extent. Because I don't clean very much. But I've never felt like, as a woman, someone's going to step into my house and, like, I think there's only one time I've felt that, and that was because of outside pressure, basically being told that. And so that's sort of our family dynamic that we grew up with. And so for church leadership, we always saw our dad, I mean, not always, but Dad was our pastor for a lot of our lives. Yep. And so obviously church leadership then looked like a man. However, we were never raised to believe that it was weird or wrong.
Yeah, I never had, I didn't even think that was an issue, honestly, growing up. But
right,
I'm a guy, so.
Well, and truthfully, I didn't either, and I'm not a guy, so. I didn't know until I came, Sam, I didn't know until I was older how serious the issue was. And I think our parents really did a good job of not allowing that to play into who we were and to who we are. And in some ways I felt guilty because I didn't understand some of the struggles that people have gone through. But in other ways, I'm also grateful that I was protected from feeling that burden myself. Maybe that's narcissistic, but
I don't think so.
Yeah. Anything? Did I cover most of the? Was it because we were? I mean, Sam you're 6 years younger than me.
I think so. Yeah.
Something like that. Was it the same for you growing up? I don't know.
I mean, I heard more about like anti-women preachers from like outside from the high school and stuff. It's like when I've been older, like I never even thought it was an issue until like I think 10th grade when someone was like yelling at me because I think that was when you were going to seminary or something like that. You were about to become pastor.
Probably.
Someone actually got mad at me and started yelling at me about it, and I was like, why? What's wrong with that? I don't see an issue with that. And she brought up the one first. I forgot what it is.
Thessalonians.
Yeah, which I've heard a lot.
I think. Yeah. Timothy. I think it's Timothy. Whoops.
Pastor over here.
We just talked about Thessalonians in church on Sunday, so.
So you just passed ordination, right? Okay. Just kidding.
My bad.
But no, I know, and like I said earlier, my Christian group I'm semi part of at college.
Yeah.
Most, like the leader he's really cool about it. Okay. But some of the people I go, I've heard negative things about Ruth being a pastor.
No, really?
Yeah.
Well, and that's not
that's not like
that's not the
atypical.
only thing.
Yeah.
I mean, you know, something me and Elijah have dealt with as we've been married is people who have a very negative perception of how we've chosen to live our lives.
Mm-hmm.
With me being the one working and you being the one who stays home.
Yeah.
And people who, quite frankly, to our faces told us it was fine. And people we're close to. And that's been really difficult. It's been really difficult to navigate that because you still love the people, but to also to think I'm still like for me growing up to think I would have ever dealt with this issue as a person would have been really hard for me. If you told me 10 years ago somebody would look at me for working and say, "Why aren't you staying home with your children?" I probably would have thought that they were telling me some story from the 20s and it was made up because it's so contrary to what I have experienced. But it's the reality for a lot of people who feel those pressures, who are told that's the only way that things should go, or that it's emasculating to allow your husband to stay home instead of you. And that's really difficult. It's really difficult to hear, you know, because this whole notion of, as a woman, it's my job to make sure the only thing, like all my dreams get set aside for who I married, when reality...
For what I mean, for what a historically, you know, patriarchal society just assumes that you should do.
Yeah.
Set everything aside because that's how...
Well,
that's how history has mostly just been for women. So therefore, that expectation's already like on you.
Well, and it's belittling for you as well because the idea that a man couldn't be happy raising their kids is really sad. It's a sad thought.
It's one of the most amazing things I've ever... Probably, the most amazing thing that I've ever experienced is being able to be home with my daughter like every day.
And I love Lily to death. And we both know I would go crazy if I was a stay-at-home mom. I am so happy every time I see her. And it sucks every morning.
You are a working woman.
It's true. I've always been. Well, and I've never understood this need for there to be a power dynamic where one of us has to sacrifice our dream for the other.
Yeah, because
when it could just be all of us trying to help each other. And I don't even just mean in a marriage relationship.
And it's not even like it has to be like you and I both agree that like marriages shouldn't be pushed in either direction for really any reason because there isn't anything wrong with anyone of any like the husband or wife or anyone of any gender staying home or having a career or doing both. Like there's been historical maybe patterns or like assumptions about women or men and about their, you know, there's always assumptions based on just societal standards throughout time about what, you know, roles should be assigned. But I think the reality is that I think we're living in a time where more and more it's just becoming more clear that like those don't have to be so defined and they shouldn't be so defined because some women do, I think, you know, enjoy staying home with and raising their kids at home.
And that's awesome.
And some, you know, there's so many like mixed examples now that I just feel people either wouldn't have accepted, you know, even decades ago. And some people still don't. I mean, the whole point of this is that some people, kind of a lot of people still really don't like to accept that idea of those roles not having to be present.
Well, or like, so as a man, for both of you, can you imagine having to have a sit-down conversation with somebody to prepare them for the fact that your wife was going to stay home? It's just a ridiculous thought, right?
Yeah.
Mm-hmm. Yes, it is.
But but it wasn't. I mean, that was a real conversation we had.
It was something that we really had to do. Yep.
And it's the same. So when it comes to church leadership, I've had similar conversations where I've sat with people in leadership who said, "Okay, Ruth, you're going to this church, and admittedly, they had a female pastor before, and it didn't go well. So just know that going in.
Wouldn't even make sense if that was worded the other way around to men.
No, it wouldn't,
Wouldn't
because
even make sense.
because you're not seen as a representation of your gender.
Yeah. Yeah, because if someone said that, hey, we had a male pastor and it just did not go well, so be aware, I feel like the person being told that would honestly just go, okay.
Right? Like,
All right.
What about them? They're totally different. Because for some reason it's okay to accept that men can be totally different in leadership roles, but women cannot. Women are one way. And it's like, whoa, let's calm down. Yeah. And that's not the only... I mean, honestly, as a female pastor, I appreciate hearing that because it will tell me about what I'm going to encounter.
Right, yeah.
It really will. And even still, there are churches that are within the UMC that are getting their first female pastors. Now, females have been allowed to be clergy in the United Methodist Church since, I think, 1969. Maybe 1962. Somewhere in the 1960s. I am sorry for anybody who knows the answer to that question. Whoops. But they still, I mean, it's still new. And like,
yeah,
my first Sunday ever preaching as a female pastor, head pastor, someone came up to me after and said, well, I thought that went better than I thought it would.
Yeah, your first day.
That was my
I remember
first
that.
Sunday. And
Gosh.
immediately was followed up by a couple leaving the church because they felt my skirt was too short.
Mm-hmm. That was all.
That was all within the first week.
Oh my goodness, I remember.
I had other people who were willing to buy me the appropriate clothes, quote unquote, to appease this woman, and always followed up with, "We don't think it's inappropriate, but they do." Then I had someone say, well, I wouldn't care if you preached naked, but this person does. It's like, why would you even make a comment like that? Like, why is that necessary?
Yeah, and these aren't stories that we've heard. These are stories that that you, frankly, have experienced in the last few years.
100%. Yeah. I mean, I've only been serving in a church pastoral setting for about 5 years now.
Yeah.
And I've been asked 3 times if I was going to baptize in a bikini. I have been asked if I was naked under my church robes. I have had one person who has continued to try to follow me inappropriately for quite a while, about a year.
Seems more than a year.
And, you know, I mean, the number of times I heard, your clothes aren't bright enough. You know, we just wish you would have brighter clothing as a woman. What? I'm sorry, I sweat a lot, and light clothing shows your sweat stains, so thank you, but no thank you. Like, it's a very practical reason, but it is also the reason why I had to wear more dark clothes, if anybody was curious. But
get that out of the way right now.
Oh, yeah, get that right out of the way. No, but there's stuff like that, and the sad thing is it can really beat you down and make you not see the good parts of ministry and the people who are incredibly supportive of female pastors and of making sure that you feel welcome in things, because sometimes it's just easier to focus on that negative. And it's very belittling to have people, and I say this, and this isn't obviously the only issue this applies to, but to have people look at you and only see one thing about you. You know, that's very hard. And a few years back, there was, and we talked about this when we talked about shame culture, the video that went around that talked about comments female clergy have been given, read by male clergy.
I was thinking about that video. Yeah.
And that video, most of what they had said was very normal to me.
Yeah.
Because it's just comments you hear. And hearing the male clergy get super upset about imagining somebody say that to them was very eye-opening to me. Even though I have a father in the same denomination who is a pastor who I can talk to about things, I didn't realize how different our experiences were.
Yeah. Yeah.
Even then. And it's sort of, I don't know, it's sad. You know, it's sad to me every time I hear my brothers say, oh, somebody yelled at me because my sister's a pastor. Or when I was working at McDonald's while I was in school and having somebody say, I don't really believe in female pastors, but you do you. But it also led to some great conversation where by the end of that, she said, you know, I didn't believe in female pastors, but I really believe you were called to be a pastor, and so I've had to change my mind. And that was really awesome, I will say. That was really awesome. So, I guess be kind to your leadership, whether they are female or not, be kind.
Yeah.
But particularly understand that, you know, I mean, I guess there's no way to, if you wouldn't say it to a man, why you say it to a woman, I guess.
Yeah.
But I don't know how to, like, I don't know. I don't know a good answer to this. Because I've said for a long time, as a female pastor, it is not my personal mission to make everybody love female pastors.
Yeah.
And I know that's very controversial amongst female pastors and seen as not fighting the fight. And that's not to say I wouldn't fight that fight. But more, I try to respect the fact that other denominations had this conversation and came out with a different view. And I don't like to belittle anybody or belittle their whole ministry. And it's more, my job as a pastor is to help people see God and see Christ.
Yeah.
Not to force people to understand that I'm the best person in the universe because I am a female clergy person. I think that's too far of an extreme. I think there's a way to handle both of those, to say, I think you should be pushed to see how women have roles in leadership and should be encouraged to be in leadership in the church. And also say, but I don't want to become so bitter that that becomes the only thing that I can see ministry as.
Yeah.
I don't want to do that. So I guess that's the balance that I play. And, you know, you might think that that's silly, but even in ecumenical groups that I've been a part of, one, there are certain denominations that refuse to participate because of female clergy. And two, there was a specific church where the pastor participated in the ecumenical group, but the understanding was that none of us, because it was all female clergy and one guy, that if we were going to his church, we did not preach. We could not preach. It was just not allowed. And that was the reality,
Yeah.
you know? Very, very, very nice guy. Absolutely a wonderful person. But also, that's sort of some of the stuff that we deal with. And again, I would encourage people to go back and listen to, if you didn't, our Tuesday episode about some of the history and realizing it's not such a traditional view to have. There's really a lot more to it than just saying, well, you know, the Bible says. Let's look and see what the Bible really says about it. But any closing thoughts from you guys about women in leadership?
I'm not really sure what else to say.
Yeah, I don't got anything.
I mean, you worded things the way that I think you needed to word them. I don't really know what I could add to this particular one.
Yeah.
So.
Well, I appreciated you guys sharing your perspectives on your experiences with women in leadership, and
I hope that by how whatever the means look like, I hope that as a society and as a church, that we just reach a point where like no one has to prove themselves anymore for any reason. And right now, one of those big reasons that people do or feel like they need to is because of the simple fact that they're a woman.
Yeah.
And I really, really pray that eventually that completely unnecessary fight just doesn't need to be fought anymore, because I can't imagine how exhausting it is. And I can't imagine how much it just holds back ministry, you know? So we need to get our crap together and stop making that such a stop making mountains out of something. I was gonna say making a mountain out of a molehill, but the molehill shouldn't even really be there in the first place. So,
Yeah.
I hope that we can get our heads out of our butts and just stop fighting over stuff that really shouldn't be fought over at all, and just view everyone, regardless of their gender, as part of the body of Christ, regardless of what role they're in, because everyone has something to add, and I'm tired of stuff like this holding that back and people having to fight for it when all they want to do is just be a part of ministry.
Well, and
I hope we can get there one day.
And our heart is for this podcast again was acknowledging the hurt and reasons why people stay away, and I think this is one of them. Why women being so excluded or treated the way that they are within churches is a large reason of why women choose to go to certain churches, or men as well. It's something that I think the church has to address, and has to address well, because right now there is not that treated equal, and that is sad.
Yeah.
But I do believe there's a lot of moving forward, and I'm glad for that. So we have hit a little over the end of our time, but from all of us here at Church is Stupid,
Comma butt.
I'm Ruth.
I'm Elijah.
And I'm Sam.
And we hope that you have a wonderful rest of the week.
Not.